Hello and welcome back to the Free Speed Podcast, your go-to podcast for navigating fitness and life with purpose. We're your host, Natasha Bozic.
And I'm Calvin Fogler.
Today, we have a special episode. It's going to be another kind of interview-style episode. We're going to be getting to know Calvin Davis Fogler, a little bit more.
For those of you who didn't know my middle name, now you know. That is a beautiful thing. That is so funny. It's so funny because
I don't have a middle name,
which is interesting. So if you're, I guess it's like a European thing.
It's a European thing. I actually have no idea, but I don't have a middle name. My mom doesn't, like my sister doesn't, my grandma doesn't. It's just first and last. And it was the weirdest thing because growing up, everyone like in my classes would be like, "Why you don't have a middle name?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's just not a thing."
Yeah, I wonder if it's easier to steal your identity if you don't have a middle name.
That's what you think about?
No, I just, you know what I mean? It's like, I wonder why, like, we started doing that. It must be a Western, like, kind of North American. I don't know. I don't know how many cultures. We should Google that, though.
Yeah. But, yeah, so we're going to get to know Calvin a little bit more on a deeper level, starting with kind of just his childhood, how he kind of played sports his whole life, and transitioning now into more elite level athletics and endurance performance sports.
Yeah, but honestly, for those of you who don't know me, or even if you do know me, like my life has never been one like very straight path. I feel like I've had a lot of just setbacks and adversity and hardships that have kind of taken me along the way. I've always been involved in some sort of athletics or fitness to some extent because that's kind of what's shaped me and given me purpose. And I think what's interesting is like, it is a little corny to kind of say like, oh, sports kind of teaches you so many useful values and lessons, like working with a team and in individual sports as well. But I actually do think the strongest and the most kind of monumental things that have shaped me have been taken away from competing. And I think like if you guys take anything from today, it will be just like kind of these lessons and these impactful things that have happened to me. And a lot of it is connected to also not only how the setbacks impacted me, but how it impacted me when I tried to kind of return to play sports or kind of compete at any sort of level, and even just in school, because I always held myself to a very high standard and I always wanted to win. And so I think that kind of expectation I put on myself definitely impacted me and has affected me in for good and for sometimes bad until here we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And if you guys don't know Calvin, he has a very unique personality where he's unlike anyone I've ever met before, but in the best way possible. Like, this
should be interesting. Like, I don't know what you're gonna say.
No. Like, he can come off as very intense sometimes, but that's just pure passion for what he's trying to explain or talk about or whatever. And he's changed my life in so many ways, and I feel like everyone needs to get to know him just a little bit more.
Oh, that's nice.
And I feel like ever since we started dating, my life has literally done a 360. Like I would have never imagined to be where I am today without him. So, yeah.
That's the nicest thing she's ever said to me.
Practicing my wedding vows.
I love you. All right, let's get into like what have we been up to recently, because it's been a chaotic last week. If for those of you who have been following us on social media, basically we don't have cyclones in North America. They're called hurricanes.
I didn't even know what a cyclone was.
Yeah, when we first heard that there was a cyclone coming towards us, we weren't sure like how significant or how severe this was. And based on just every Australian we knew's reaction, we were like,
this is nothing.
This is like this happens all the time.
Yeah.
And then about a few days later, we're watching all this news, and they're like saying how this is going to be the strongest storm since 1950.
Yeah.
And I'm not an idiot. And like Tash knows, like when things like this happen, like I'm pretty what's the right word? Like I'm very calculated, I guess. I'm a very calculated person with things like this, and kind of how I operate in life in general. But basically, I was like, if based on the 1950s, this was going to be the strongest storm since then. Mm-hmm. And based on looking at the flood maps and understanding kind of what a cyclone is, I was like, we're screwed. Like, I don't know if yeah. Like, we're probably fine where we live right now, but my car will be underwater kind of thing. So we should figure something out. And like, fast forward about a week, this cyclone was moving at snail's pace.
Yeah, and it literally like did like it was coming towards Brisbane, and then it like went back up, and then did a circle, and then like came back. But by the time it hit land, it had slowed down so much that it, instead of a category 2, it was like a, I forget what it's called.
Like a tropical storm.
A tropical storm.
Yeah, they were saying it could go from a category 2 all the way up to like a category 3, and like everybody's thinking like trees are going to be like completely uprooted, like all this stuff, all this like kind of chaos, anarchy. And there was crazy. No, there definitely was some sort of like just like destruction.
Yeah.
But the fact that like you could have beachfront property in the Gold Coast, and you could probably have been walking away pretty unharmed.
Yeah.
Like, that isn't what I pictured.
Like, we were worried. We were so worried that houses will literally be ripped up to shreds.
Well, that's what a hurricane does in North America.
That's what it does in North America. So yeah, but like, I'm thankful. Like, I'm so thankful, because I had the worst anxiety this week, just with the unknown, and like we had to meal prep food, then we lost power, we didn't have power for a few days, then the food in the fridge goes bad, then the grocery stores aren't open, we're living off of crackers and fucking stale bread.
You don't really realize how how much you take for granted power and just like Wi-Fi, electricity, all these little things. Like, we were at the point where like we had lost hot water. We just had we had water, and that's it. Like,
but we were lucky that we had water. A lot of people lost water and power. Who? Jasmine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she lost water.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know she actually lost it.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So many people lost water and power, and like walking away from this unharmed and nothing happening to like the place that we're renting or anything is just we're thankful. But there was a lot of destruction
and flooding.
And trees just completely, like, I do not understand how this works and how the wind is so strong that it rips the roots out of a tree. Like, if you think of how big the roots are underneath the ground, like, I just don't get it. I think it's maybe because it rained so much that the ground became so not it hard anymore, that it just like
it has to be. It has to do with definitely the rain, because you're right. I wouldn't have understood that at all, because the you would think the tree would just snap before it would completely fall, but you're right. It must just be the water just completely ruins the soil, that it's just it's screwed.
Yeah,
but anyway,
this is the craziest experience we've ever had.
Yeah, this is the most significant storm. And especially what they were hyping it up to be. Like, the worst part was it was supposed to hit Thursday
and it got
night,
delayed.
and then it was like Friday, and then Saturday, and then like Sunday, when it hit Saturday, and I went on a run that day, and it was just like we were running in the middle of like when the cyclone was supposed to have hit. And it was pathetic. Like, it was like, it rained. Don't get me wrong, it rained a lot. But like, when you think about how severe the cyclone was supposed to be.
I will say the winds in the days leading up to it were really scary. Like, kind of blow you away scary. Like, the trees in our backyard. Like,
yeah, you don't really know.
Yeah.
But one of the coolest things that kind of happened kind of because in around this was because the cyclone had so many people scared, and like all the grocery stores were like, people were like freaking out, panic buying everything. The gyms were closed, but because I have like a key to the gym I work out at, Hunter McIntyre needed a place to work out, and so I saved the day. And what will be funny is if he ends up doing well in Scotland, he's got an Elite 15 race in like 3 days, which is crazy. But if he does well, I'll take credit for that. I'll take credit for for the 1% that it might have helped him, because it was insane. It was just like the fact that all the gyms were closed, like no one in the area could do anything. But it was cool because I got to train with like the 3-time world champ, like
in
a couple times. Yeah, in the dark. And so we'll see.
Okay. Anyways, that's what has been going on the last few days. Life is starting to get back to normal now. The grocery stores have started to open back up today, finally. So we finally got some like meat and some fresh food. Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, life is starting slowly to get back to normal. But the beaches are completely ruined, completely eroded. It's just crazy that like even just a small like category 1-2 storm can just completely ruin the beach. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how like they try and fix that. Like, is there? I have no idea how that works.
Clue.
Yeah, I wonder, because we were talking, because the beaches have dropped and eroded so much, like the water level is so high. So we're not sure if like, do they bring more sand from somewhere to like try and fix it? I have no idea. Or do they just get grave diggers and just start pulling the sand back? Yeah, it's funny. I think we sound stupid a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's people who are like, that's obvious. But but yeah, we'll see. So anyway, that's kind of what's been new with our life. Oh, one of the tragic things that actually has come, this isn't tragic, I'm very dramatic about this, is because of this whole storm, my Olympic triathlon in 2 weeks actually was officially canceled yesterday. And so it's a bit of a bummer, because I definitely wasn't prepared, but I've been doing a lot of biking and I was excited to do it nonetheless, and then have another month going into my second one. This triathlon didn't get rescheduled a week or two. It got rescheduled to the end of May. So now it kind of completely flips my whole plan, where I'm going to basically build into this triathlon, this Byron Bay triathlon, in the end of April. And then based on how that goes, I'm planning on doing the one that I was supposed to do in 2 weeks at the end of May, but I need to now massage that into my marathon plan. I need to make sure that it doesn't take too much away from my marathon training plan. I think I'll be fine. It's just a bit of a side quest, more closer to my marathon, which not ideal, but it is
I think you're super strong on the bike no matter what. I think if you need to work on something, it would probably just be the swimming aspect.
100%.
And especially if you just focus on the marathon training and then just trying to get in some swims. I agree.
I think if I just focus on swimming technique and I continue my biking and then manage my running. I did this 20K run after my Hyrox, like a few days or 4 days later after my Hyrox. And it was like my first run back, and it was just way too aggressive because I was running with Hunter McIntyre and like I was just trying to keep up with him.
Yeah.
And it was just stupid. I was just running like sub 5 minute kilometers for 20K. And
that's hard.
It was almost like a full half marathon that I was running for no reason.
Yeah.
And it definitely wasn't. Memories. Yeah, it was more of a memory kind of run. But now I'm kind of paying the price right now. So let's get into today's episode. We're delaying a little bit. What were you going to say?
Oh, no. I was going to say you have knee pain. I have toe pain because the other day I dropped my charger on my foot, on my toe. And I didn't think anything of it. I just kind of shook it off and went, ow, that kind of hurts. And then today I was looking at my toe and it's literally purple blue. And it was hurting earlier today, but I was wearing socks, so I couldn't tell. And I took my socks off before I took a shower, or after, I don't know. Yeah, before I took a shower. Definitely not after I took a shower. and I looked down and I was like, that's not good.
It's crazy how like
so
the littlest
swollen
things.
and yeah, I don't know. I guess I have a pretty high pain tolerance then. Maybe I somehow
Yeah,
like
you're just really tough.
yeah. What can I say? Okay.
No, you just gotta cross your fingers when stupid little things like that. Like the
Yeah.
worst thing that can happen is one of those things before a big race.
Yeah, you don't want that to
Like
happen.
I've had this weird knuckle pain that I'm just dealing with like when I do the skier, it gets like this motion with my wrist.
It hurts.
If you're listening to audio, I'm just basically pushing my wrist down, and it like causes like some tendon pain, and I don't know what's going on in my knuckle, but yeah, I just need to chill out with it. But
Okay, let's start with life before fitness and the starting point with everything. Let's talk about your childhood and your parents and your brother and kind of how that shaped you to who you were when you were a teenager and kind of how you've grown from that to who you are today.
yeah, I mean, it's funny you say life before fitness, because I think fitness was, or just sport really was so monumental in my life.
Yeah,
like
I think you were biking in the womb.
Yeah, pretty
Going like
much. If I knew what it was, I probably was. Yeah, so I think, I mean, everyone says this, and I don't say this as like a brag at all, but like I think because when I was really young, like, you know how parents give their kids balls, or like they give them like little action figures or trains or whatever kind of toys.
I didn't have that.
And the toys, if you listen to Tasha's episode 2 episodes ago, let's go give that a listen.
My mom would never give me an action figure. Here you go.
Well, what's funny is I probably threw those action figures away.
Oh.
I probably I threw a lot, or like, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't into those things. I was into like throwing balls. And
I don't think my mom has ever thrown a ball.
And just like playing catch and like kind of like doing things like that with like close to sports, I guess, like aligned with sports.
But I think that's also because your parents grew up playing sports.
No, not really. I mean, my parents. So my parents had
your mom played volleyball.
No, my parents both like definitely played sports, but and like my mom played high level, like collegiate Division III kind of sports. So it wasn't recreational by any means. I agree, but it wasn't like they pushed sports onto either my brother and I.
Yeah,
they just kind of knew that it was like important to kind of keep us around
active.
sports. So yeah, but basically from a young age, I was always just like I enjoyed just playing with those sort of games. And I think early on I sort of learned this competitive behavior just growing up with an older brother. So my brother was 4 years older than me, and really like from a young age, all I wanted to do was kind of, you know, I was thinking I would say like I just wanted to play with him, but I honestly just wanted to play with anyone, and I needed I felt like when I was really young, I wanted attention from whether it was my parents or my brother. Like I just wanted attention, and so that was kind of like how I internalized being very lonely. And I think that like from a young age kind of continued all the way up until I was around fifth grade, when I was like 12 years old. I think that I always had this very competitive nature to myself, that if you knew me ever since I was a kid, I always like wanted to be the best. I always wanted to be like the most athletic, or like compete in anything. And I think like I still remember memories of when I was maybe in like 2nd or 3rd grade, and like some of the best moments of my life were like being in gym class and like winning like a stupid game. To someone it would be stupid, but to me it was like I just won the world championship.
This is so completely off topic, but the other day, I don't know how we thought of this, but we were thinking about gym class when we were kids. I don't know if they did this anywhere but in Canada, but there was this colorful parachute thing.
So embarrassing.
Where
Those were the worst days.
yeah, so you'd be like all in a circle holding this parachute thing, and we'd go 1, 2, 3, and like lift it up, and then you'd like put it over you and like sit down on it.
Yeah, I remember when I saw.
Do you remember that? And I feel
gym
like
class,
you, like when you were a kid, you probably were just like, you were loving that shit.
No. I was the opposite.
Oh, really?
I was the opposite. Yeah, when I would walk into gym class and I saw it was like parachute, I'd be like, this is fucking lame. Like, what am I doing here? Because I just wanted to win. Like, I don't think people realize.
The popcorn game, you probably won that.
I don't think people realize, like, if there was a kid that you would call a tryhard, like, I was that kid. Like, I just remember I would do anything to win in those like little games, because that's what I lived for. That was like what gave me purpose, and so that kind of led into the sports I was involved with. And I think that's where like people started to, like, my parents mainly started to pick up on that, is like I needed challenges, and I needed to continued to be challenged in my life, because that's what like also made me feel alive and gave me some like purpose. Mm-hmm. And so they took me out of the more like recreational leagues, and so that's when I started playing competitive hockey, was when I was in 3rd grade, and that's when I started playing more competitive like soccer and all the sports that I ended up playing. And I think
so what sports did you play?
So when I first started out, I started playing hockey, soccer, and
all at the rep level.
Just yeah, it was mainly hockey and soccer. I would have played every sport, and that's the thing, is like I remember even early days, like I had to choose, like hockey and basketball were at the same season, so I couldn't do both. Like it wasn't an option, and I showed up to basketball tryouts and tried and like basically went all the way through it, and I decided like I loved hockey, and because hockey is so ingrained in Canadian culture, it was a no-brainer. Like it was like what my friends and I would talk about all the time, and there was just so many kids involved in it. And then
tennis, right?
And then so I didn't start tennis until very late, like 6th grade. And yeah, I mean late for a kid to start tennis, but yeah, so basically it was hockey and soccer, and then my parents were good at like kind of getting me into a lot of different sports when I was young. So I knew how to play like baseball and stuff like that, but I didn't really play competitive baseball or anything, or even just like my parents used to like take us on snowboarding and ski trips, and like I just remember like skiing when I was super young, and so like I was just super grateful and privileged to have those opportunities, which was nice. And I think that's like one of the best things that I was able to do when I was young, was like my parents were always enabling me to try different things, which was like one of the greatest aspects. And I think what I realized later in life, and I think a lot of people realize this, is like when you're a kid, if your parents were so selfless that you never even really thought about them living their own lives, it really kind of changes your perspective of how lucky you were. And I feel like I was able to live a life like that, where I didn't think about like my parents having their own lives until I was much older, because they were always basically allowing me for me to do whatever I wanted at any time, right? Like if I had to go to a sport, they would drive me there. Like it wasn't like I had to work around their schedule, because they were so like able to allow me to do the things I wanted. Obviously, like you can't do everything, but I think that was one of the greatest abilities just growing up with parents, that like I could have my one mom basically drive me and help out, even like other people's parents too, which was nice.
And if you guys don't know, Calvin has 2 moms, so I feel like the way you grew up, it might have just been felt a little different having two women figures
Yeah, I think
there for you.
I think
Like, how
I
do you
will
think
never,
that affected
you
the
know,
way?
I never really thought anything different until maybe when I started to realize I didn't have like a standard or normal like father figure. And I think like my parents, like I guess if you're talking about like maybe like stereotypical roles, or like maybe a dad is a little bit more stern, or like a little bit more kind of a intimidating force in a family, I think I definitely lacked that sort of fear. And so I think that definitely may have influenced me differently had I had a father, like a male figure in my life. But I don't think that it would have actually benefited me because
No.
of my
Yeah.
personality. And
Yeah.
I think you know this, like I'm a very I'm a very driven and like learn from my mistakes, I guess, if you will, kind of person. And when I was very young, like I hated when people told me what to do. I always internalized
So
when
you
I
were just stubborn.
was extremely stubborn. And like, if you knew me as a young kid, you would have, like, basically the way I internalized it was like, all these people who are older than me, because I'm a kid, treat me as if they know more than me. And for some reason, I always had this like mature outlook when I was really young, which, if you will, like, people don't really appreciate that. But like, I was always under the impression that I would learn from my mistakes, and I was always taught to like not do stupid shit, and that like I would figure it out in that way. And so when people would tell me what to do, I would definitely be very like I would explore the boundaries, if that makes sense. Like, I would always like to test the limits because I always wanted to just like experience for myself.
Yeah.
So I think had I had a father figure, just to bring it back to that, I think I would have felt a lot more restricted in that sense, because my parents always like allowed me to do the things that I wanted to do and learn from my mistakes. So if it was like a sleepover, right, it was never a maybe. Like, some kids, it was like, oh no, you can't go over to so and so's house. It was never like that. Maybe my parents would be like, well, if you have something important tomorrow, maybe this is gonna like affect that, and then they would like kind of help me make the decision for myself.
Yeah.
But that's what I think was like the greatest aspect of having two moms, was like their ability to kind of understand how I operated.
So when it comes to that, do you think women are just more nurturing in terms of overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say, because I think because I was raised by two women, I think I am different than most men naturally, because I feel like I have a much more nurturing side to me than like
I wish I had a different perspective, but I also don't, because I also just grew up with one mom. So it was like, I never experienced what it was like to have a father figure either. So I wish like I knew what it felt like to be able to tell the difference, kind of thing.
Yeah, but I would say, like, I think it's like important, like, I've kind of internalized that I go against just gender like stereotype and roles, because I was raised by two women. I always like felt more comfortable in like understanding that there was like, my parents had to go through shit that I didn't even realize, like trying, like, when you think about what it takes to be a lesbian and come out as a lesbian in the 1970s, like or 1980s even, that's when my parents were. And it's like, gay marriage wasn't legal until like the 2000s in the US and Canada, and like very late 2000s in the US. And so my parents weren't like banished from their households or anything like that, or like disowned. But like in terms of like how I feel like when I saw like what kind of bravery and like true like self-reflection and what they would have had to go through to go against what the social norm is to just like be heterosexual, like I think it inspired me to be it inspires me to be more of like someone who isn't just like a cookie cutter male stereotype, and it kind of brings out more of this like nurturing side to me. And like I think when I'm a dad, like I think I will be more of like a nurturing parent than even like maybe even than you. Like I think
I understand.
You know what I'm saying? And so like I guess it kind of goes against,
but that's just because of what the way you
we
were raised.
Yeah,
it all comes down to that, I think.
Yeah. And so I think it's interesting like how that kind of influenced me. But
so fast forward to maybe just outside of high school, and maybe you going to the all boys prep school.
Yeah, and in what and just how that influenced me.
Yeah, and just like how that all worked out, and how that kind of led you on the path to maybe rowing. How it's so completely unrelated to hockey.
I kind of mentioned this in another episode before about how like I've always basically prepared for what's next by like being very calculated, like I said earlier. In like when I see a door starting to close, whether it's like a few months out or 6 months out or like in a week, like I am very kind of calculated in the sense that I'm like looking for what I can kind of pivot to. And so I feel like when I was in high school, what's interesting is I was a lot less serious about sports, but they were so important to me in that like it was a no-brainer that I was going to be like the best athlete internally. It wasn't like I cared what other people thought about. It was like internally in my own head, like I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be the best athlete in my high school, in the city, whatever I can do to do that. Whether I was or not, it didn't really matter. It was, I want to be the best athlete.
During like track and field, like when you grew up and stuff, like were you the type of kid who got like first place and everything?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like
do you think you're just like naturally gifted?
No, and that's the thing is like I think what people for like you could see like maybe I did well in a lot of things, but ever since I was I switched from like, so I basically, and we can get into this too, which is Switzerland was a whole crazy. So when I was in 6th grade, my mom, who works in the universities, moved our family to the French part of Switzerland, and I grew up speaking French, like in the French immersion program in Canada. And so when I went to Switzerland in 6th grade, I went from having all the sports I ever knew, everything set up, all these, like my life was like my friends, everything that was familiar, and all that was like ripped away from me. And I wasn't necessarily, when I first moved to Switzerland, I wasn't really worried about this. Like I was excited, and I think it was a huge culture shock when we got to Switzerland, and I was so young, like I was 12, like even the fact that French wasn't my first language, like I was so young that like it wasn't very difficult for me to like completely assimilate, I guess, into the culture. Like I think it was more that the way the kids treated me when I first moved was like an outsider. And so anyone who's ever had to move, like whether you were young or old, like I have experienced this, and I think nobody really fully appreciates how difficult it is. And I think that completely changed my perspective of just relationships and how much I valued my friends and kind of how I saw people. And I can laugh at it now, But the reason it actually makes me so emotional and so sad is I remember being 12 years old and sitting like in my like sitting in the apartment of my of our one flat apartment on the third story in Switzerland, in Lausanne, Switzerland, and having nobody to play with, and like going to the park with my mom every day, like every single day. And just based on like the kind of person I was, it was so suffocating and so just so lonely that like it completely kind of shifted my perspective of what I was grateful for. And I think it's actually like fast forward 10, 15 years and like things that I've had to overcome is like gratitude has become such an entrenched value in my life. And when I compete nowadays, and like even when I struggle with mental health, when I go to gratitude, when I think of the people in my life that I'm grateful for, the things that have influenced me, I think that is like the most strong pillar, because my mom was there for me every single day, willing to go to the park with me and like just allow me to do the things I needed to do. Because if I wasn't able to like exercise or just like release energy, then like it wouldn't be uncommon for me to just like absolutely blow up and like start just punching holes in like the drywall.
So you remember like punching holes in the wall when you were...
Yeah, I just remember being a very angry kid, and it wasn't like every time. It was more like I felt that like it's funny, it's very similar to what you said. Is like I never felt understood. I never felt like my parents really understood like how I felt. And I think in a desperate attempt to show them how seriously emotional or affected I was, that was like my last resort. So I think like obviously once you kick a hole in your clean drywall, it's like that's like the most significant thing, because like you go from it being perfect to like actually like crossing the line and like deciding it. But then once your drywall has a hole in it, then like punching another or like kicking another hole right beside it, it's like it becomes no, it's interesting. Wait,
so you're saying you then kept punching holes in it because
no,
it was already ruined?
I think it's a principle that comes down to like, I think it's sociology is like when people steal for the first time, it's actually much more significant than they realize, because once you decide or you've convinced yourself that it's like it's okay to do something, or once you feel like, oh, I can do this and I maybe don't like actually like nothing will happen to me or something, then you internalize it. I think it's just an internalized response from doing something that you shouldn't do. And I think like it was just an attempt for me to like basically show my parents that like something was wrong, like something was seriously wrong. And like it was an attempt to show them that like I was willing to basically damage like my own drywall in my room so that they could understand how
is that why there's like a patch thing on your wall?
What do you mean? You didn't know that?
Oh no, I had no idea.
Yeah, so I ended up like I was embarrassed by it when I got older, like when I was I think like 14 or 15 when I moved back. Like I remember
moved back from Switzerland?
Yeah, because it was more just like, this didn't just start in Switzerland, but it definitely like made it a lot worse, was this like feeling of like loneliness, and like I had all this energy that I couldn't spend, and like I felt trapped, and just like I was almost stuck in a younger person's body. Like I wanted more freedom. I've always wanted freedom, and I didn't feel like I had that when I was young, like a young child. And
even though your parents like kind of told you could do whatever you want, you still
yeah,
felt
I
like
just
you
I just
didn't
felt like
have
just
freedom?
I just felt the reality of like other kids being bound by their parents, and like I think like that caused more. I also was bored. Like I couldn't live with myself. I think what I realized as I matured into like late high school and like started to deal with like effects of after my concussion, which I had in 8th grade, was I started to realize the importance of like living inside your own head and like how you can enjoy being alone and enjoy being independent. And I think what people don't realize is when we were like 11 or like 9, 10, 11, 12, this is like before Instagram. Like Instagram happened right when I was
What was it, 6th grade?
yeah,
7th grade?
so 6th grade, that's when we got Instagram. And if you remember, like OG Instagram wasn't like doom scroll algorithm. It was like
No.
whoever you followed, you saw the photos they posted.
Yeah, and that was it.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So like all this AI stuff, it's so funny how like when you reflect back, it's like the world was just so simple and so different. And so I think like that was also like another area like where it's like hard to actually think about like how bored I was, but it was like I had nobody. I had no friends. I hung out with one kid at lunchtime in the like 10 and a half months I lived in Switzerland. There was one kid that ever came over to my house. And even at school, I remember like there was a kid who bullied me, and like I didn't like, we always learned about bullies and stuff in Canada, and like you would always like laugh and joke about it because like it, I guess like I always felt like I was someone who I would like stick up for somebody. I would never let bullying happen. And so I always like thought it was ridiculous to think about it. And like until I was a victim, and I would never think of myself as a victim, but like I still remember the school I went to. They ended up like closing off 2 of the exits because of some drug problem that was going on like in the city that we were living in. And so there was only one way to get in and out. And like I would basically leave school and like I would sprint to the door because I was so afraid of like this guy trying to like beat me up.
Really?
Yeah. And it's just crazy because it's just little things like that like just like they shape you. You don't even realize it. But I think Switzerland like also gave me a lot of like life experience in that like because we didn't have a car the whole year and we used public transit, I was like 12 years old, pretty much getting myself to and from everything I needed to do on my own. And like I still remember like just complete chaos. It was a Saturday morning. I needed to get from where we lived to where I played hockey to meet up with a teammate to then get driven on like in his car 2.5 hours away. And on the bus in the morning, the bus driver ran a red light, and the woman who was standing up was like might have been like 70 years old, fell over, and like her earring ripped out of her ear, and like it was just like gushing blood everywhere. It was just a crazy like kind of turn of events, and she was just like, it was just blood everywhere. And I look at my phone and there's like 1% battery. And so I call my mom. I'm like, you need to get here now, because like I was also like, I was like freaking out because I hated missing something like that. Like the fact that it was avoidable and like these things, and like I hadn't charged my phone, I had screwed up or whatever. And like, I was just panicking. Right. Mm-hmm. And like very luckily my teammate, I could get in touch with him, and like he picked me up at the bus station, and like things just barely worked out. But then like my phone died, and my mom was like not sure what happened to me. And it's just like weird little stories like that where you just kind of mature and grow up faster because you're 12 and you've never or I think I might have even been 11 at that point. And basically I just think that Switzerland changed my perception of like, oh, like everyone wants to be your friend, and like life is just like kind of what you normally expect it, and it just like things just continue to happen, and it's just everything's easy. Like it just was like a complete wrecking ball in my life, and it made me kind of go through that kind of adversity early on when I was young.
So then fast forward to post high school and college. How do you think that kind of also shaped you to who you are right now?
Well, I feel like it's
you
important.
Went to an all boys prep school in Maine, right?
Yeah, and I think like it goes the most significant thing that's impacted me in my life, and like, do you want me to go into the whole concussion thing or save that?
It's up to you.
Yeah, like, so the most significant thing that has ever happened to me in my life was when I was 14, I guess, in 8th grade. So this would have been a couple years after Switzerland, and I was snowboarding with two of my good friends, and
back home in Canada.
Yeah, back home in Canada, and like I had gotten like big time into snowboarding in like when I lived in Switzerland, because they have like just crazy mountains, and they have all these like just my parents would have us go to all these different ski hills and stuff, which was really nice. But it grew my confidence to the level where like I was always trying to like maybe show off a little bit, or like do things on my snowboard that maybe like was pushing the boundaries, because like I enjoyed doing tricks and that sort of stuff. And I never loved skateboarding, so like it was like a nice like kind of in between in that kind of like trick sort of sport, because I love to scooter and do things like that, but I was never good at it. But like snowboarding, I was good. And that was the issue, is like I was just trying to like do something that was like trying to impress my friends. And this would have been New Year's Eve in 8th grade when I was 14 years old, and it changed my life forever. And what happened was I was like just on the second run of the day, and this has all like been retold to me, but I had hit this huge snowmaking machine. The snowmaking machine was making a mound of snow, so don't get these confused. Like the snowmaking machine had made a mound of snow that I was trying to basically nuke the hill, like just like bomb the hill straight down and then hit this jump that it had kind of made. But it wasn't like a formed jump. It was just loose powder in the form of like a mound. And so I had hit this with like full speed, and my snowboard had caught in the powder and basically had just sent me head over heels. And like I guess I had reached my arm out, my left arm, and my head had hit my arm so with so much force that I snapped my humerus during the fall, and then had like a very severe brain injury. And pretty much I can't remember anything that had happened to me at that moment. Like I couldn't remember what the name of like I couldn't remember simple things. And I think this is why it like I had never seen I had never known how important your memory was in terms of like just keeping you grounded until that day, because the paramedics had told me to remember the word cow, and I remember not being able to remember the word. And when you know that you should remember the word, and when you know that like you're desperately trying to hang on to it, but you for the life of you can't remember, and you know they just told you within like a few seconds, and then there's like a few people surrounding you, and your brain starts to spiral, your thoughts start to go dark. And like I remember basically feeling this overwhelming sense of panic. And I think for those of you who have heard of like the fight or flight response, that is where that moment my brain learned through this trauma, like how to freeze, because it was the only coping mechanism I had at that moment. Because like my memories, my thoughts, like they were all like, I couldn't control them anymore. And it was just like this only way to basically deal with the trauma at that moment. And so basically fast forward a few hours, I still remember like my life restarted this day when I woke up like 2 hours later in the hospital, and my parents were there, and I had all these like rubber pads against me, and they said that I had gone into this machine to like a CT scan to make sure my brain wasn't bleeding. But I still don't remember any of that
of the actual day, or
yeah,
like the
I don't remember the day leading up to it.
Oh, interesting.
I still like, I remember like when people reminded me like I had gone to the movies way too late the night before, and that was a mistake, and then I woke up early. But basically I had made that mistake, didn't get a good night's sleep, and then had this severe like head injury. And then when I like the first memory I have is like waking up in the hospital with like my arm in a ton of pain, and just feeling the sudden like blurriness and confusion of everything in my head.
Crazy.
And
I didn't know you broke your arm.
Yeah. And the people, like the doctors were all saying like it was the greatest thing that had happened, because my arm was broken. Like I was forced to slow down, and like I was forced to heal my arm before I could go back to any sport for like a couple months. But when I tell you like the concussion I endured that day, like that has shaped me, and that has like for the better, I would say, impacted me like mentally, because it has forced me to endure so much more mental health, I would say, like in just like how my body deals with like just like pressure and anxiety and those sort of things. And I've always been so curious into like how I can mentally be stronger and endure more. And I think that's kind of where I get a lot of it's not the event itself, it's like almost like how it impacted me has made me see things and see some scary shit with like, I think people don't really know what it's like to not know how to remember a word, like the word cow, within like a couple minutes of being told that. And I'll never be able to do that again, I doubt, like for a long time.
Do you only
but, like,
remember this because somebody told you after that you didn't remember
the word? Yes and no, because I do have these like very like faint memories of panic that I actually can like kind of, it's almost like this like weird kind of like flashback kind of thing I have, where I can just remember like this very faint panic that I had when like they were trying to tell me to remember my password for my phone so that they could tell my parents like what had happened. And I was saying my password, and it's the same password I have right now, so I'm not going to say it. But basically it was just repeating, like I was repeating myself because I didn't know that I hadn't told them. And I was desperately trying to hang on to, so like say my password was like 0000 or 0756. That's not my password, but so I was just saying 0756 because it was like my body was desperately trying to hold on to something that I could remember. Like it was like I had nothing else. And I think that's why like dementia and Alzheimer's, those things are so, they're so kind of like surface level to me, because I truly think like not having your memory is probably one of the scariest things that I've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. And it's completely shifted how I've like redirected and even stepped away from contact sports. So like to really like fast forward this through high school, like I played hockey and rugby and some of my favorite sports. I love team sports. But what I really had to do at a certain point was decide stepping away from contact sports was probably one of the best decisions I have made when I did, because even though I never experienced a concussion even close to as severe as the one I had, like just the nature of contact sports, anyone who's played it, like you just, your head gets hit around and like things happen. And I just remember deciding whether I wanted to like keep playing rugby in university or try and play hockey in university, and I likely would have if there was an opportunity. And is that why
you went to the prep school in Maine?
Well, going to the prep school in Maine was to play hockey in university, and if I had the opportunity to, I would have. Like, I'd be lying.
But you're saying you didn't get the opportunity to.
No, and okay. And some things happened that year where it was just unlucky, where my COVID hit the year I went, so I graduated high school in 2019 and COVID hit the year after, and that was the year I was at this all boys prep school, and it was at the end of the season. It was in March and the season ended in February, so it wasn't like we cut off any hockey, but it also affected like all the like recruiting and things. And my coach though also was suffering from some trauma, like from his he lost his wife, which was a few years back, but he was still kind of dealing with some like alcohol problems and stuff like that. And so he actually just left our team halfway through the season. And so we kind of lost like a huge connection with that. And not that I think I was like going anywhere special, but like I was definitely in a place where the last 2 years of playing hockey, I was significantly better than where I was when I was younger. And I was always a late mature, like I always matured late, and I was always someone that like I felt I was on like a path where I was just a late bloomer, I think. Yeah. And when I came to terms with the fact that like the hockey was pretty much, it wasn't where I wanted it to be. So like trying to hold on to it would have been like a disservice to my own character, like trying to hold on to something that was like done, that I knew I needed to pivot. And so.
And how did you decide then that rowing was what you were going to pivot to?
And so that's almost another.
Because I find that just so interesting.
I think that's like another leap though. It's like, I think it was the first thing I was thinking was like, I was going to play rugby because rugby was the only sport that I could play in a collegiate level. And I wanted to keep playing. Even
though you were worried about your head injury, you were still willing to play
Yeah.
rugby?
And even given all the things that had happened, like I was willing to pretty much still continue to play rugby. And that was my plan. Like I would have
at the University of Guelph,
or even like out in California where I went, like there was still like a rugby team there. And I had planned before I had decided to row. And I don't think a lot of people realize this. It's funny when I meet people nowadays, like the most relevant and recent thing in my life was like I just rowed for 4 years and I dedicated my life to that sport and to the team. But like that wasn't really who I was.
Wasn't always what you wanted.
It wasn't what I wanted, or it wasn't really who I was. Like I was always I always loved team sports, but for the camaraderie, not for like, I think rowing is one of the most individual team sports you'll ever play because it's so data and like mental and just like you and the rowing machine. And like as much as you are on a team on race day, you train almost as individuals.
Yeah. Did you like that aspect of it, or would you rather?
Yeah, no, I did like it because it also gave me a little bit of a taste of what life was like after rowing, because I think what I was so sick of after rowing for 4 years and like what I was so just like exhausted by was other people being able to affect my success. And
yeah,
I think,
because it's like no matter how much work you put in, if someone else in the boat lets you guys down, like
yeah,
that's just the way it is.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think
But isn't that like that, like
that's
in
like,
like
no,
soccer or
yeah,
anything?
yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. What I think I got to at that point of finishing rowing was I had done what I needed to have done in team sports. And I think I reached that, like that was a maturity thing where like I had accomplished and achieved like what I wanted to with team sports. And I knew that because of my experience and like how serious I was starting to take like just training and things like that, I noticed that like even though it wasn't necessarily maybe I didn't matter if I was like the best or the worst in the boat or like the best and the worst on my team. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that if the people that I was training with or the people that I was like going to compete with weren't as serious or weren't on the same page as me mentally and just making the choices that like would allow them to operate and function and compete at the highest level, then it wasn't really going to help race the race. And I think what I noticed was like how important it was to like even though some people like to let loose or like party or have different ways of like competing at the highest level or competing to do their best. I think what I wanted to like experience was just if I lost or if I fail, it's on me. And I was sick of being a part of sometimes teams where like people would point fingers. And I think it's easy to point fingers after you lose or even just not take responsibility. But I got to the point where I was just so sick of like, you know what, like it's so amazing because if you were just competing individually and you weren't doing well, then you'd probably just quit. And I think you can kind of get lost in that in team sports where you can just be like, oh, it just wasn't my fault. Oh, it wasn't like you can just completely deflect any responsibility in your performance. And you know this, like when you compete in Hyrox, it's not like you can just say, oh, yeah, like wasn't it my teammate's fault? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can't do that in a solo Hyrox.
So is that why you're kind of transitioning to more solo stuff now?
Oh, 100%. And like I think
but I feel like also it's kind of hard to get into team stuff like after university unless you like go join a league or something. But even then it's
but like, I think like I am way more excited to do like a Hyrox doubles like the pro, like the Elite 15 pro doubles. It excites me more than the singles.
Because singles is a whole nother mental game.
And like I think what people don't realize is like a lot of the athletes that I've met at the highest level who are competing individually are usually very very alone, very isolated, very like focused on like their own progress and their own kind of journey. And I still think like being a part of a doubles team like allows you to share some of the enjoyment and the highs and the lows. And I think just having one other person, like you pick that person, right? It's not like you can you're forced to be with them or like anything like that. And so I think that is what excites me the most about competing. And I think there's people that I probably know that would be like, what do you mean? Like the doubles isn't as exciting as the singles, or like it's kind of like easier. But like I know myself well enough where like I could try and like just be the best solo athlete, and I will, because I know it'll rub off. But I also know like what I'm most excited
It's
about
just, it's more fun
would
for
be
you.
yeah, and exactly. And it comes down to like what I actually know I'll enjoy more long term is like being able to work with a teammate and see how good we can get. And I think that's like really the best way to explain it is like when you're a part of a team and you notice that people will deflect responsibility, or like even if for no reason of their own other than like it's just an easy way to like deal with a loss or like a bad race or something or a bad result. I was sick of it. I was like, I'm not living like that when I'm older. You know what I mean? I'm not.
So you finished the 4 years and you
Yeah.
were in the top boat in your last year, and then when it finished, you were like, that's all I needed, and that's it.
Yeah, I think like I had, as much as like I think to some people we didn't live up to maybe the potential that we might have had. I always thought that like just the fact that I had worked my ass off to just put myself in that boat and put myself in the position where I was able to try and do my best to help our top boat perform at the highest level, at the highest race in all of U.S. rowing. Like people have to remember this is like, don't get me wrong, like the best athletes aren't necessarily in rowing, and I don't think that, but the best basketball players and the best football players and the best hockey players don't usually go to university, or like they're in university for a year and then they go right to pros.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with university rowing is because there isn't a lot of funding in rowing, a lot of the Olympic best rowers in the world are trying to extend the amount of years that they're rowing in university in the US. And because the US rowing is almost the highest level, like you could argue that some of the university rowing in England is at that caliber, but like in terms of like a university level of rowing, like where people are actually under like 24 or like in their early 20s, that is where the highest level of rowing in terms of depth is. And so like we were racing against these Olympians, and it's just insane because like
How
we
old
were
were they?
Were
they your age too?
They were all ranged from like, there was kids who were like Olympic level, like 18-year-olds.
That's insane.
Or 19-year-olds, sorry. But it was like anywhere from 19 to like, there was like 26-year-olds that would, because of COVID, got to extend their eligibility.
True, yeah,
and then they could do an Olympic year, so they wouldn't actually go to university for a whole year and just focus on trying to train for the Olympics. Like it's like you didn't realize how many levels there were to this sport. But just because of that, like there was these like super, super high level rowers. And it was just like insane how elite the highest end rowers were. And we were racing against them in the national championship. And so, yeah, I got everything I needed to out of rowing. And the reason I say that is like, I could have quit about right after I injured my back in my second year, and I could have quit a whole bunch of other times just because like I didn't love it. But the reason I stuck through was because I don't fucking quit. And I think people don't realize maybe what, like how important that is in terms of like just kind of who I am and my character. But I think you've probably noticed that about me, and what you love about me is that like I am so loyal to like my word, and I don't play around with that. And I think anyone who knows me well understands that, is like I don't take my word lightly. And so when I say I'm going to do something, or when I commit to it, I see it through, because my character and like my responsibility to the people that like I told them I would do something is more important than how I feel on any given day. And I think it's tough because sometimes it is like beating my head against the wall. Like, I don't enjoy it. But when I eventually draw a line in the sand, like once you get to here, then you can walk away and you'll be proud of like sticking through the adversity. Then like that's what ultimately shapes my value and my character into like just knowing that I've endured some fucking hard shit.
That's crazy. So if there's one thing that you would want people listening to remember from your whole story, what would it be? Just to wrap things up.
You know, it's one of the greatest questions, I think, because I told as much as I could about kind of my background, my life, and I think you would even say like there's a lot more that I would like to even talk about on more episodes. I think one of the most important thing that I live with is being grateful. Like I said earlier, I think just having gratitude so close to every sort of decision you make is the most influential thing that has ever changed my life. So when I was struggling with just mental health, when I was in like high school, just dealing with, it was all kind of side effects of not being able to be in control of my own brain. And because I wasn't in control of like my thoughts, I didn't have any sort of ways to get out of my own head. And being able to understand that I could take control through like just breath meditation or like having things that could actually heal my my ability to slow down. And I think that's like where I compete nowadays from, is like when someone asked me recently like or they didn't ask me, they said like good luck, or they said like why do you compete? What I always go back to is I compete for the people who believed in me. And I do firmly believe that, because I think some people say like they compete for themselves, but the truth is like I compete for the people who have made sacrifices in my life to allow me to be where I am. And like that's the most powerful thing, and I'm so fucking grateful for those people, because without them I wouldn't be competing nowadays. And I think that's how powerful the people who have helped me get to where I am now is. I compete for the people who believe in me and who have believed in me.
All right. What's the free speed for today?
My free speed for today is lean into who you are. Lean into the person you are, and like how things have shaped you and allowed you to be exactly where you are today. Because if it weren't for the things that have shaped you or allowed you or made you endure hardship or setbacks, then you wouldn't be able to be at the point you're at now to set yourself up to achieve whatever great things you're destined to achieve.
Amazing. Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode of the Free Speed Podcast, getting to know Cal a little bit more on a deep level.
If you're listening to today's episode, just remember, be vulnerable with the people you love. Be vulnerable, because that's the greatest strength you can have, is being comfortable in who you are. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We really appreciate you. I really appreciate you listening, and we hope you enjoyed.
Yeah.
See you next time.
If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment about what episode you'd like to see in the next few weeks. We are going to be planning a few more episodes for you, so we'd like to know if you guys are interested in hearing something specific, so let us know. And if you're on Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. We would appreciate it.
Thanks, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.